Welcome to the Startup Defense. My name is Callie Keene. Today I have John Williams. John has, well, arguably one of the coolest domains of any company that's been on the show. He also has a really broad spectrum of technology that he's working on and he's partnered with. John, I met you at Tulsa through Paul Gus Garcia, also, good friend of mine, friend of the show. But we hit it off, and then we've been working on a few really interesting things. And so this has been a long time coming. I'm really excited to have you on the show. And before we get into nitty gritty and talking about munitions and dazzling lights and, I don't know, working on really big things, same question I ask everyone who's on the show. What are you passionate about right now?
I'm passionate about getting the warfighter, whether that's a U.S. warfighter or, a Baltic state warfighter, really the next warfighter who's in the fight right now, the tech that they need, and the tech that they deserve, really. There's been this huge delay in defense and getting people what they need. And I feel like we just got to find ways to not only, bridge that gap, but also I'm focused on doing the next generation of military assets. I don't want us to waste any more time building stuff we've been building for 80 years. Let's move forward.
So your company is War Inc. I'll lead with that. Pretty clear directive on warfighter focus, and also kind of, like I said, a hot domain. Everybody wishes now, if they had John's domain.
Yeah, I had got a call from some buddies of mine while I was out in Poland last. Trump had decided to make it official, like, hey, we're the Department of War now. And I was getting all these phone calls like, hey, have you looked at your website lately? I was like, no. They're like, you should probably check out your traffic. I was like, oh my God, what's happening over there? Like, we became war.gov. I was like, man, I hit the jackpot on the timing scale, at least, us becoming war.gov and us being war.inc is pretty awesome. It's funny because I actually tried to acquire war.com for like a long time. And there's a 70s band called The War, and they've owned it forever, and they'll just never let it go. But at least on the defense side, there's war.gov, then war.inc is right below it. So I follow that to the end, I guess.
How did you arrive at, why did you found War as a company? Like, how did you arrive here at this mission? Why did you decide to jump in and do this?
So I was in the Marine Corps. I was medically retired out back in 2013. Got out, kind of landed on my face a bit, like a lot of guys do. Struggled a bit, but then ended up starting an ammo company early on, and that went fairly well until some ITAR's laws changed. Long story short, I ended up getting out of the defense space. Ended up, actually working with Microsoft, Bing, 343 Studios, the Xbox team, and then after that, ran a professional race team for a couple of years. And then COVID hit, and it shut down everything we were doing. So I kind of stopped that and decided to reposition myself again, figure out what I was going to do next, and that's what kind of gave rise or birth to War.inc. I started because I wanted to get back in the defense space, and I started seeing, like I said, this gap, this piece where it's like, between training the warfighter, where a lot of old GWAT era level vets have been exiting the military, and I'd spent some time around current troops, and I just felt like there was this need or gap that wasn't being filled anymore. There where a lot of that combat knowledge was being replaced by stuff to where or by programs that really didn't seem like they had the experience to back what the teaching, like the training that they were going after. And so really when I first started War Inc., I was kind of more focused on like how I take my knowledge base and start training guys again. Because I loved training. I mean, I like training individuals in CQB and mount and, urban tactics and yada, yada, yada. So I started the company doing that and apparel, honestly. And then I got a call from some of my old mentors, and they were like, hey, like, we want you to come back into the defense space a little bit heavier than you are now. So I was like, okay, I can do that. And then that was a springboard from there to where we're at now, which is, went from that point on to now kind of more focused on the munitions development, kind of UAS systems, light laser programs, so forth and so on.
Yeah, this is one of the things that we hit it off is you have this tech partner network and this portfolio of really interesting products. So we're talking and you're like, oh, I have a thing that does that. Oh, I have a thing that does that. That's kind of how I feel some days, because you're in the market when you know a piece of tech that does it like this, solves a problem like this. This is such a small community, but you have a really broad portfolio of like interesting odd bits. But then when you take it in total, it's this really great capability package. So I mix and match and grab. I've met a lot of technologists, but I haven't met that many besides yourself and a couple of friends that we have in common that really think of this kind of portfolio approach. It's like, oh, this is a cool piece of tech, and it's a tech company, but it's not really like, it can't be a successful company in defense unless we put it into this portfolio. And as a part of a teamed effort, we can all be successful. And I like that perspective because I feel like I can stay in my lane of things that I know how to do, but then bring a more complete package to a user or to a customer or to an interested party. That's really what fascinates me about what you're doing. And I will pry a little information of what you can share. Share kind of what I'm talking about, the breadth of things that you're actually working on. Thermo camouflage, counter UAS, small attritable missiles.
Yeah, so this piece back here through one of our, and I guess I'll move back a step and just kind of reference the thing you're talking about, right? So Project ONI is the Ordnance Nexus initiative, and it started out kind of as a focus in munitions, but then we realized that it's not just a focus on munitions that we need to focus on, not just the munition, but the weapon systems that shoot those munitions, as well as like how do we secure the data around those munitions and that critical IP that we're constantly involved with, that we're speaking about, that we're sharing data over. So I think that was actually one of the first things I think when Art introduced us, we were talking about Project Hugin and like the encrypted technology for the cell phone, and then how some of that stuff could be shared across K-Form and us and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, it goes, without saying, like whenever we develop any of these things, when they get to the field, how do we secure them? How do we make sure that they are equipped to not only like be used by the warfighter, but survive getting to the fight, so that if they're being depoted somewhere, like you have to camouflage it. You have to keep things as safe as possible, and maybe even deploy decoys of the same material elsewhere just to drive, the enemy in a different direction. So we've, like you touched on, we do everything from encrypted comms. We do have a patented anti-thermal mitigation camouflage piece that breaks up the thermal outline in any spectrum. We have the TDPs for 40 millimeter up to 2,000 pound bombs. You see the 70 millimeter warhead back here. We have the Atalatal through Corvus over here that we're working on with them. You see fusing over here this is the AB-152 fuse for the Mark 80 series line of bombs. So yeah, we just touch on a lot of different pieces, and all the way down to the manufacturing side, the base material science side, where we talk about cryogenics. We have a stateside team that builds energetics here in the United States, as well as an energetic enhancer team who, accompanies that and is a complement to that program, where we can take, like the 1 pound payload here of this Atalatal and turn it into something that has a felt effect of something that's 2 to 7 times that 1 pound. So now that 1 pound payload can act like a 7 pound payload potentially. So you get much greater effects out of smaller packages.
Yeah. So to sum this up, this is what I find is really interesting about what you're doing, is that you're working directly with users. You have an operational background, and then you're taking it all the way back to base materials. So you're looking at this as like, if we want to move quickly, what needs to be true, or what do I need to actually be able to go from left to right, from a need to a capability? So that, that's really where we're tightly aligned, because technology just kind of floats around, and the cryogenic technology, like we've talked about, you can improve anything with that process. It's not specific to munitions or to tank barrels or to whatever, but where does that kind of sit into this solution set? And like, what are we actually trying to do? It seems like it's harder to look holistically at a problem from end to end like that. But in my experience, it makes it so you can go quickly, because if there's a gap, you have to go find who's the person that has money, who's the person that has the system, who's the person that has this past performance, what has to exist to be able to deliver this capability to the warfighter at the end of the day. And I found that's really interesting. Then you do something completely different than me, right? I know nothing about munitions, so it's like I find that's interesting. But it's like once you go down that rabbit hole, it's infinite breadth. Is like on the manufacturing side, on the materials side, on the critical minerals side. Like it's just it's tough because a lot of people, they're happy to say when they have like a dual use technology, which is pertinent, especially for startups. Like, hey, how do you survive in the defense space? Well, being dual use is makes things a lot easier to survive an initial brunt, because you can sell it to the commercial market potentially. Where energetics is still kind of more finite, and that's on the base material science side of the house. But the cryogenic side, like you're saying, it's almost like an infinite use technology. Like it's not just the defense space or munitions, like you said. It's not just barrels. It's not just munitions. It's brake rotors. It's drivetrains. It's we've been around for 30 years. We've done stuff for NASA. We've done stuff for Blue Origin. We've been part of the F-35 program. We've done all sorts of different things. But like it's not just one industry or one niche, and it's not just one end use product, because we can do the end use product like we're talking about, but we can also do
the tooling to on your manufacturing side. And if you're a large enough entity, you probably have trucks of some kind. So now you're talking about affecting the logistics chain. And so it's just something that continues to roll over and roll over and roll over. And that's actually expanding. So we're going to be creating a new facility for this in Montana, potentially also in Washington. And then there's also some conversations in Florida and over in the EU in a couple of different places. So, it's one of those things that it is really cool to talk about because it's fun talking to end users and manufacturing and people that are building stuff. Cause it's like, hey, like I would love to show how you can make your product stand out amongst all the other products you're going up against while also, bringing down your manufacturing costs all in the same process.
Where is all this going for war? Like what are you excited about to see? I know the cryogenics, the process is it's really interesting. It's tied into a lot of the other things that you're working on, but holistically, what's the target right now? Where is this going?
As a whole, or
because it's a broad mission. The world's changing very quickly.
Yeah, I think, the more I have the conversation, the more that it kind of gets leaked into the ether, if you will. The more excitement's actually, I think, getting built around this concept. So Project Oni really has two missions, right? One is taking bleeding edge tech that I can, source and vet here in the States and abroad to help build those next generation of military assets, weapon systems and munitions. But the other side of the house is kind of leaning more back to that manufacturing side. We have the TDPs that are kind of have their own kind of advancement in 70 millimeter frame in counter UAS systems for missiles and rockets and for other large scale ordnance. And the other side of the Project Oni house is we want to kind of, and I know this is a bit of it would be it's really just to toot our own horn, but we want to bring all these right partners, right? So that we can be the team. Project Oni can be the team that said, hey, we put together a plan and a program where you'll see the first ever a time where we build like a complex round in one place on the manufacturing side. So, where we have places that do energetics and do filling, like our job now is to bring in the forging, the fusing, and maybe a lab facility so that we can, and then secure all that data and like use all the Project Oni partners to build, a next generation munition, like the next advancement in a 70 millimeter warhead program that's been Oni processed, if you will, or a 155 program that's been Oni processed, or, Mark 80 series line of bombs that's been Oni processed, and showcase like, hey, you don't have to import your shells from over here and take the energetics from over there and the fusing facility from over here, all to go to a lab facility over there. You can do it all in one spot if you really wanted to. And I think that, and people are starting to kind of like understand this concept. It's a compilation of the right companies and the right ideas coming together in one spot. And I think that's where the future for us, where I'd really like to see us head is in that direction, because it cuts down on logistics problems as far as like, worrying about, shipping these things all over the place to get filled and then get sold. And there's been some interest from EU side of the house for that. There's been interest inside of INDOPACOM for that. There's other, and this isn't just a munitions piece. It could, be replicated to other industries as well. And so there's interest inside of AFRICOM and some other places. So.
I mean, I love a big idea, right? But
yeah,
when I look at Corvus, right, or I look at counter UAS in general, whether it's kinetic, soft kinetic, non-kinetic, and you attach that to something like Project Oni, you're like, okay, well, that means that it might have machining and electronics and systems integration, but what I think is interesting, and this is an idea that's uncommon in the U.S., but if you go anywhere else in the world, you'll see an industrial park where it's aligned around producing a certain end product, and all the peripheral functions and features needed, skills needed, are right there, geographically right there. So you can prototype quickly, so you can scale quickly, so you can make custom configurations of that thing, so you can foster talent. All of these problems that we see in manufacturing, they're not really just proximity or access problems, they're orchestration problems, right? Talent is an orchestration problem.
Yeah.
Like if all of your vendors are geographically disparate, you don't know who's getting smart with the skills that you need to move quickly because you're not connected with them. And this is obvious if you go to China and see how manufacturing is done. And this is obvious if you go to even Germany and see how manufacturing is done, right? The way that talent is fostered and the way that products are developed. But kind of non-intuitive to the way that defense is done currently in the US, whether it's something that we might design and make or something that you're designing and making. This idea of literally it takes a village or it takes a consortium or it takes an industrial park to pull the right partners together to put it together. I think it sounds so simple.
It sounds so simple, and yet it's littered with bureaucracy, red tape, and then an industrial machine that's been so used to doing one thing for so long that it's really hard to move away from that, because the defense industrial base has this blueprint they can look at and say, hey, if we do X, Y, Z, we know that we can meet the current requirements. So let's go out and do that and then make money, and we'll just continue on the same war path that we're on. And so it takes. When I've talked to the DOW about some of these things, and I've got some relationships with some of the biggest primes in the world, and what the circling talk is always like, oh yeah, this sounds great, and so I'm like, okay, is there any chance we can change the requirement? They're like, yeah, sure, if you want to sit 3 years on a palm, and maybe then you'll see a change in the requirement. They're like, it's faster if you could just manufacture this yourself, and then we can just buy it directly, and then it's a whole different product. So the requirements built around the whole new product versus trying to change requirements. So, I think there's that kind of thing we're butting heads with. I think the other thing we're butting heads with is technology is it's escalating so quickly that our own DOW, I think, is kind of in some different avenues, is kind of in a pause and a standstill, because there's all this money, and we understand that there's a need, and then we understand that there's going to be World War III is looming at some level, but we don't really know where to spend our money because we don't know what tech's going to come out tomorrow. And so we're seeing kind of this lull and pause here shortly, outside of maybe space or other things, but especially even the old legacy stuff, vehicles and artillery. There's a desire to keep some of those things going because the primes drive a lot of that, but there's also some things that are stalling out at that level too on the armor side, because we just don't know really what the need is going to be for the next war. And with that also said, one thing I've tried to preach, a lot to all these different, defense companies that, we come into contact with. It's if you have a brand new product and a brand new technology, I'm glad that we've all decided to hop on this bandwagon and get in together. But if your product doesn't come initially, and it's not designed initially with the Polish or Ukrainian or Baltic state warfighters or INDOPACOM fight in mind, if it doesn't have a Ukrainian instruction manual with it, then you're doing something wrong, because it's not the U.S. warfighter that's going to use your stuff. At least not initially. And if your technology is really good, it'll survive iteration of 6 months to a year down the road, and maybe the U.S. warfighter might use it. But at the end of the day, the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps and Navy and everyone else, they can sign off on things and say, hey, that's great, and they might even get it. But I mean, likely the DOW is going to purchase it, and then it's going to be shipped overseas to be used by someone in reality. You know what I mean? And the U.S. warfighter will use version 5 of it if your technology is good enough to survive iteration.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a tech company and you're building something that there's no requirement for, you're in the business of creating requirements and waiting for those requirements to come out. But me, from the industry side, I'm like, I'll build whatever you want. Just tell me what you want and I'll build it. And then on the government side, they're like, we need industry to show us what we should be buying. And so there's this little bit of standoff where technology commercially is just moving very quickly. And I think on the government side, the situation is in flux quite similarly. And so we're ships passing in the night of who wants to buy what and who wants to build what. But yeah, to your point is there's some known requirements and known buyers. And if you're trying to create traction, run a business, build something interesting and forward thinking and actually deploy it, probably build it for people who are going to use it right away. It's a good idea.
Exactly. I mean, we've had a lot of those conversations around and maybe in some cases, depending on how fresh of a start you're looking at, if you can find a way to produce this closer to that, as close as you can to the FLOT, the better off you are in some cases, right? If you can take this and take your widget or whatever it is and build it in Poland or build it in Ukraine or build it in some other place that's closer, then, that stands to reason. Or, going the opposite direction, going down to Australia or, working within the Philippines or some other place like that. Those are solid avenues I've seen people take and we've helped people take. It just depends on really how fast you want to see your product used. So that's another thing we do is we help tech that wants to go over to Ukraine, and we take it over there and we can showcase it, and we can take it to Zero Line and get battle tested ARs if you want. And then we also work here in the United States. So if anyone has products that they want to see used on a U.S. Army range, they want to do counter UAS or UAS stuff, then we got a pretty good relationship to go showcase stuff for the Army and Marine Corps. So
There's something interesting that you and I have talked about frequently is how and where something is actually manufactured being an actual asset. It's a capability that the company can bring. So whether it's in multiple locations here domestically or then instancing and being able to manufacture in Europe, it's really something to think about. How is your product getting manufactured and owning and being able to develop that as part of the capability that you're baking into your technology. Obviously, I'm a manufacturing guy, and I'm complaining online about manufacturing being overlooked. It seriously is one of the most common reasons why startups end up failing. Is they can build a prototype, they can make it work, but they're not really thinking, this is the cost of being able to manufacture this product. Well, I need to have 2 manufacturing locations domestically, and if I get this partner with Europe, I need to be looking at who's my European partner or how am I going to stand up a facility there, because shipping it, something like a munition, would make 0 sense. Really thinking through that is a lot more complex. Yeah, seeing what you're doing with Project Oni really brings that to the forefront, is what needs to be true, or who needs to use it, how is it going to get produced, like how's it going to get sent there. I think that's interesting. Whether you're working on radios or UAVs or you're working on munitions, it doesn't really matter. If you want to scale, you should be thinking about that whole process. Where is it going to be made, or who's going to make it?
Yeah, I think another thing to the manufacturing point of being overlooked, right? Like, and even if a lot of times they think about, oh, where should I have it made, and what's going to be the most advantageous piece, both logistically and potentially legally, depending on like how your product gets placed inside of different USML categories or whatever the case is. Another thing that gets really overlooked is yeah, okay, maybe you might know exactly where you need it manufactured, but can that manufacturer come up with enough raw materials or the materials you need to actually manufacture your idea? You know what I mean? Like, that gets overlooked quite frequently, especially in the defense space. We're talking about all these different metals that we need or chips that we need. Like in some cases, it's just not a reality to produce at scale, at least.
Physics. It's just market physics, right? It just can't be done, right? It's amazing. John, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Startup Defense. I I get a kick out of chatting with you because you're always like up to some other new super interesting thing. So really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll come on anytime we can discuss again.
My name is Callie Keene, and this has been the Startup Defense.